This is section 11 of the ACT Math Manual. Section 11 is NITAS. If you have already watched the VITA video, which was section 4 of the ACT Math Manual, I believe, if you've already watched that video, you will know that VITA was the first of the major tin techniques. We have 3 of them. VITA was the first, as I said. This is the second, NITAS, and then the third would be general tin, and we will do that technique in a later section. So we're going to be doing NITAS right now. First and foremost, just like we did in the VITA section, we have to make sure we know how to recognize opportunities when we can use NITAS. And VITA, you may remember, was variables in the answers. So when we saw variables in the answers, that was our tip-off that we could use the VITA tin technique. Well, NITAS has its own tip-off clue, and that is, we're going to go ahead and write this down, numbers in the answers. Numbers in the answers. That is how we recognize NITAS questions. However, there is also this issue of the S. This is not just NITA, this is NITAS. And the S stands for single. And I'll explain right now what that means. So again, NITAS stands for numbers in the answer choices, and the question is asking for the value of a, so I'm going to actually highlight this here. Question asks for value of a single variable or unknown. So when the question has numbers in the answers and the question is asking for the value of a single variable or unknown, we can use NITAS. Now, what does a question asking for a single variable or unknown look like? Well, it looks like all of these examples here on the left. So notice this question is just asking for X. That is one single variable. This one is asking for Maria's age, which is basically the same as asking for what M equals, if M stood for Maria's age. This is asking for N. This is asking for the distance. That is like asking for what D equals. This is smallest possible value of A. So this would be what is the smallest possible value of that A variable. Now, for comparison or for contrast's sake, let's look at some questions that would not be asking for a single variable or unknown. So if a question asks for the product or a ratio, or one thing is what percent of the other, or the average of several quantities, or what fraction of something, notice that these are all relationships between 2 or more quantities, 2 or more variables. So X and Y, A and B, R and S. This one's a relationship between 3. And then remember, a fraction of something is a part over a whole. So again, that would be 2 different quantities involved in what that question is asking for. So these guys on the right, all of these examples, these are questions that do not ask for a single variable or unknown. We generally cannot use NITAS on these questions. There actually are some where we can still use NITAS, but this is the kind of stuff you want to look for on in looking for a question that can be NITAS. You want to look for questions that just say what is X, what is M, what is N. So number 18, you will remember from the VITA video, I said a few times that there were going to be some questions that you probably would feel confident solving with algebra as opposed to the tin technique, and that's perfectly fine. If you are good with your algebra, if you're solid with your algebra, you can probably go ahead and solve a lot of these on the day of the test with algebra. But for the purposes of what we're doing here, which is learning a fairly new technique that we're not completely solid with yet, we're going to go ahead and do some of these questions with do all of these questions with the technique so that we can see how it works. So on number 18, we're going to pretend once again, like we did in VITA, that our algebraic skills have somehow disappeared or atrophied and we cannot solve this using algebra, so we're going to need another technique. So the question is asking which real number satisfies this equation. So I'm just going to circle this whole thing because that's what the question is asking for. Which real number satisfies this equation? So like I said, we're not going to do this algebraically. We can't do it algebraically because somehow the algebra part of our brain has gone away or been fried or whatever you want to imagine has happened. So we would need a different way of solving this. One of the ways that we could do that is we could take these answer choices and we could just start plugging them in for x. We know that one of these 5 answers, f through k, one of these numbers has to solve this equation or has to satisfy this equation. In other words, one of these answers when it goes in for x has to make this equality true. So 8 to the third, I'm going to go ahead and do that in my calculator. There's my calculator. So 8 to the third, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do 8 to the third. I'm going to hit enter, and that is going to come out to 512. So I know that the stuff on the left has to equal 512. So when I throw in x equals 4, and I'm actually going to give you a little taste of what's to come in terms of charts. I'm going to draw a little t-chart, and I'm going to say, okay, well, if x equals 4, then 2 to the x times 4, which is the left side of this equation, 2 to the x, in this case, would be 2 to the 4th, since I'm throwing in x equals 4. So 2 to the 4th times 4 is going to equal 64. So obviously, answer choice H is way too small. We'll talk in a moment. Actually, right down below, we'll talk about why we start at answer choice H. Some of you might already have a sense of why we do that. But when I started at answer choice H in the middle with 4, I got 64. Well, obviously, 64 does not equal 512. It is way too small. So I'm going to go up to answer choice J. I'm going to try 4.5. I'm going to do the same thing using my calculator, letting my calculator do the work. I'm going to do 2 to the 4.5, times the 4, and I am going to get something only slightly bigger, obviously still not big enough, so 90.5. For answer choice K, which is 7, I am going to do the same exact thing. I am going to do 2 to the 7th times 4, and that answer choice does give me the 512, which is exactly what I needed. So I have a match. Answer choice K makes the equation true. It satisfies the equation, and I am done. So that's how Nidus works. Now, a lot of you may have used this technique or something like it before. Basically, anytime you have numbers in the answer choices, you can backtrack or back solve or plug and chug. This technique is similar to a technique that, like I said, a lot of you may have already used, just probably had a different name. Some slight differences in the way you're going to want to use this on the ACT, for instance, starting in the middle. That might not be something that you've done before, and the reason that we want to start in the middle, start at answer choice C or answer choice H if you have the F through K answer choices. The reason that you want to start in the middle is that the answer choices on Nidus questions will almost always go in ascending or descending order. If you start in the middle, you will very frequently be able to tell whether you need a larger or smaller result, just like happened in number 18. We started at H, we got something too small on the left, so we went to bigger answer choices, and in that way we were able to avoid having to do 2 of the answers. And if you do start in the middle, you will almost always get to avoid having to do 2 of the answers. So let's do number 13 as another example. So for 2 consecutive integers, the result of adding the smaller integer and triple the larger integer is 79, and they want to know what are the 2 integers. So that's what I'm going to circle. What are the 2 integers? So again, I'm going to start here in the middle at answer choice C. They say the result of adding the smaller integer, so 20, result of adding that to triple the larger, so 21 times 3. 20 plus 21 times 3 is going to be, and I'm just going to do this in the calculator so I don't run the risk of making any careless mistakes. 20 plus 21 times 3 is 83. Well, they said that the result was supposed to be 79, so this was a little bit too big. These answers are even bigger, so those are probably not going to work. I'm going to go to answer choice B next, and that's going to be the smaller plus 3 times the larger is going to be, and again, I'm just going to do this in the calculator so I don't waste any brain power, 19 plus 20 times 3, and indeed I get 79, and I am done. So again, very, very simple, straightforward question with the NITAS. This is the next page, page 80. There are some cases when you do not want to start in the middle, some cases where you wouldn't want to start at answer choices C or H. And that is if the question asks you for the least or greatest possible value. Least or greatest, oops, got a little bit not straight there. Least or greatest possible value of a variable. In a case that asks you for the least or greatest possible value, you actually want to start with the least or greatest answer choice. And the reason that is, we'll see on number 19. So let's read this one all the way through. If n is an integer such that absolute value 3 minus n is less than 5, which of the following is they're asking us for the least possible value of n. A lot of students are going to, if they've been told to start in the middle, they will start in the middle. And if you start in the middle here, watch what happens. So answer choice C is 3 minus 0 absolute value is less than 5. That is 3 is less than 5. Now, because that works, students are understandably going to think, well, great, I just did an answer choice and it worked, and therefore I can pick it and move on. Unfortunately, because the question is asking for the least possible value of our variable, just because answer choice C works doesn't mean it's the least possible value that would work. If either answer choice B or A worked, then one of those would be less than answer choice C and therefore would be a more correct answer, since the question is asking for the least possible value. So what you would want to do in a case like this is you would actually want to start at answer choice A, which is the least answer. You would want to start at the least answer and then just proceed down the answer choices until you hit something that works, and in that way you will ensure that you are picking the least possible value of n. So answer choice A is 3 minus negative 2, absolute value is less than 5. That is 5 is less than 5. That does not work. 5 is not less than 5, at least not where I come from. And then answer choice B, I'm going to bring this out over here. Answer choice B would be 3, absolute value 3 minus negative 1, absolute value is less than 5, and that is going to be 4 is less than 5, and that does indeed work. So now that I have hit something that works, I can circle it and move on. Now, by the way, one big difference between a VITA and a NITAS question, you may actually want to jot this down. Remember that on VITA, we had to continue checking the answers to ensure we did not get doubles. And if we did get doubles, we had to do the technique again. On NITAS, there is no way that you could get doubles. If you got doubles on a NITAS question, that would mean that ACT made a flawed question, because it would mean that multiple numeric answer choices are satisfying the equation, or in this case, the inequality. And if that were to happen, like I said, that would be a flawed question. So on NITAS, you do not need to check all answers. You do not need to check all answers. So as soon as you find an answer on a NITAS question, that's it. You're done. You can stop. You can pick your answer and move on. Now, charts. We've just seen an example or two of where I used a chart to sort of keep track of my work. And on very phrasey NITAS questions that look like these on page 80, page 81. So NITAS questions that are basically paragraph form. NITAS questions that have a lot of the phrase markers that we talked about in the keys, so commas and periods and the word and. Anytime you see a NITAS question that has a lot of those items, you're probably going to want to make a chart in order to keep track of all of your work, keep track of what's going on in all of your phrases. And it can be a little bit tricky at first to get a hang of this chart technique, this chart process, but I am telling you that if you follow the steps in this shaded box on page 80 very, very carefully and don't stray from these steps at all. You should find it a little bit easier to make these charts and to make them proficiently and quickly. So we're going to do number 29 in conjunction with these steps. I'm going to make this slightly smaller so this all will fit on here. So in the gray box, we'll just go along with the steps one at a time when we do number 29. So let's read number 29 all the way through. This says Sam and Jamie are removing cartons from a truck. If Sam removes 1/8 of the number of cartons from the truck and Jamie removes 1/4 of the number of cartons, there will be 40 cartons left. How many total cartons originally? So I'm going to circle cartons originally. That's what the question is asking. So could we do this algebraically? Some of you might be able to do it algebraically, but we're in the NITAS section and we need practice doing this technique. So of course we're going to do this using NITAS. So notice step 1 is to draw a 2-column T-chart. So I'm just going to draw a 2-column T-chart. A lot of students want to go ahead and start labeling all the columns initially. Do not do that. You will not start adding and labeling additional columns until you get to step 4. So first, it's just a 2-column T-chart. Next thing you do, step 2, is right here. You label the first column with whatever the answers stand for, or whatever variable you're going to throw the answers in for, or whatever the question asks you to find. All three of those things are the same thing. So in this case, these numbers are going to be going in for the original cartons. That's what the question is asking us to find. So that is what I label the first column. So original cartons. And I am going to then go to step 3, which is to write the first answer choice number we are going to try. And remember, we mostly start at C. If the question was asking us for the least or greatest, we would start with the least or greatest answer choice. So I'm going to start at answer choice C, which is 56. So now, wherever I see number of cartons in the question, the number of cartons, that is no longer an unknown. That is now a 56. Since I am trying answer choice C, which says that the number of cartons is 56, then anytime you see the number of cartons, it's now a 56. So basically, I've just begun step number 4. I'm going to start attacking the question one phrase at a time, and I'm going to determine how each phrase acts upon this answer choice number that I just threw in. So the first phrase just sets up what's going on here. We've got these dudes that are removing cartons from a truck. This says Sam removes 1/8 of those 56 cartons. So I am determining how each phrase acts upon or changes the answer choice number, and I'm going to add and label additional columns to keep track of my calculation. So I'm just going to add a column that is labeled S for Sam, and in that column I'm going to track how many cartons Sam removes. So he removes 1/8 of 56, which is just 7 cartons. Now be careful, some students will immediately subtract the 7 from 56. This phrase doesn't really indicate that we need to do that, nor does the next phrase. So I would be a little bit wary of doing any unnecessary or further calculations until you absolutely have to. Now this says Jamie removes 1/4 of those 56 cartons. So again, that phrase dictates that I need to add another column. I will label it J for Jamie, and here's where I'll keep track of what Jamie removes. So 1/4 of 56. Again, if you can do that quickly in your head, that is perfectly fine. I am going to use the calculator so that I don't make any careless mistakes. So that is 14. So Jamie is going to remove 14 of these cartons. 14 of these cartons. And now the next phrase says there are going to be 40 cartons left in the truck. 40 cartons left in the truck. Well, I have to see, if I start with 56, take away 7, take away another 14, I have to see if the number of cartons left matches up with this 40. I'm supposed to have 40 left. So in that last column over there on the right, I'm going to write left. I'm going to put a 40 here just to remind myself that that's what I need. So 56 minus 7 minus 14, 56 minus 7 minus 14, I'm going to get 35. That is too few. I needed 40 cartons, I got 35. That is too few, which means I want to go to the higher answers, 64 or 106. So let me try 64, and now I'm going to do exactly the same thing that I just did. So now instead of 56 cartons here, I have 64 cartons that I'm working with, 64 cartons. So 1/8, Sam removes 1/8 of 64, that is 8 cartons. Jamie removes 1/4 of 64 cartons. Again, I don't want to use any brain power here. I'm going to do 1/4 of 64. 1/4 of 64 is 16 cartons. So Jamie removes 16 of those cartons. So now, again, I'm doing the same thing to find out how many are left. I'm doing 64 minus 8 minus 16. 64 minus 8 minus 16. And look at that, I've got 40 cartons left. 40 cartons left. So everything's a match, everything works out, and I am done. My answer is D, and I can move on. So that's how the charts work. Again, I strongly suggest that you memorize these steps, follow them exactly as they appear here. They are designed to be very systematic and very simple to follow. If you don't follow them, yes, you might find that you have a little bit of trouble. As you do the next few questions, which if you'd like to try to do on your own before I do them here, you can always pause the video and try them on your own. As you do these questions, whether you do them on your own or with me, we are going to be making sure that we're referring back to the chart on the previous page, referring back to the box with the steps to making charts on the previous page so that we don't get stuck or give ourselves undue difficulty. So number 5, let's go ahead and read it all the way through. On Saturday, Sid receives his pay and spends half of it. Sunday, he spends half the remaining money. Monday, he spends half of what remained from Sunday. $4 remain. Okay, so receive originally. That's what we are looking for. So again, there's the 2-column T chart. That was step 1. Step 2 is to label the first column. So original money. Original money. That's what we were asked to find. That's what these answers are going to go in for. So that was step 2, label the column. Step 3, remember we get our first answer in the chart, so we're just going to put 24 in there. Now, working one phrase at a time, I'm actually going to move this over slightly. So moving through the question one phrase at a time. So this says on Saturday, Sid received his pay. Saturday, Sid received. It's a nice alliteration there. Received his pay and spent half of it. So let's do this. We'll do this column will be Saturday. So he spends half of the money, which means he spends 12. Now the next phrase says on Sunday he spent half of the remaining money. So I'm actually going to do one other thing here. I'm going to actually write down that 12 remains because he spent 12, and that means 12 remains. He had 24, spends 12, 12 remains. So on Sunday, this says that Sid spent half of what remained, so he's going to spend 6 of that 12. So that means, again, 6 is going to remain. So we're just cutting in half what he has to find out what remains, really. But I'm going to keep track of all this. So 6 remain. And then on Monday, he spends half of what remained from Sunday, and remember 6 remain, so he spends 3 and then 3 remain. And what we were supposed to have remaining is this 4, so this doesn't work. He has 3 remaining. We're a little bit too low, so we're going to try answer choice D, a higher answer, so that we can try to bump this number up a little bit. So we'll do sort of the same thing here. So he has 32, he spends half, which means he then has 16 left. That's that number there. And then he spends half of that, which means he spends 8 and then has $8 left. And then he on Monday spends half of that, which means he spends 4 and has $4 left. And now we have matched what the question said, so we are done. Answer choice D is the correct answer. Number 31. Let's go ahead and read this all the way through on number 31, it says that on family day, oh, how sweet. Attendance at the basketball game set a record. A reporter for the local paper asked how many adults had paid to see the game. The box office reported that exactly 450 tickets had been sold, 2,000 collected. Adult tickets were $5, children tickets were $3. Okay, fine. So how many adult tickets? That's what they are asking. Now listen, there's a lot of information here, and if you do not think about solving this one phrase, one step at a time, you are going to get overwhelmed. A lot of students, if they try this on their own right after learning the Nidus technique, they lock up very quickly. They sort of just sit there and stare at the question and wonder what the hell to do. And that is why, again, I recommend following the steps to making a chart on the previous page, and especially paying attention to step 4, which involves attacking the question one little piece at a time and seeing what you can do with the answer choice when you come to each phrase. So this is how this will work. So again, we're going to draw the T. We're going to label the first column adult. We are going to get the 325 into the chart. So this is adult tickets. All right. So one phrase at a time. Fine, that phrase doesn't tell us anything. That phrase doesn't really tell us anything, but this phrase right here does. This phrase says 450 tickets have been sold, and we now know that 325 of them were adult tickets, and there were only adult and children's tickets sold. So we now know if 325 adult tickets were sold and there were 450 total tickets, then the tickets children just has to be that 450 minus the 325. 450 minus 325. 450 minus 325. So we have 125 child tickets. 125 child tickets. And now the only other piece of information that we need to check is this 2,000 for the total amount collected. And therefore, what we need to use is we need to use this $3 for the children's tickets and this $5 for the adult tickets. And we'll just track this right in these columns. If adult tickets were $5 a piece and there were 325 sold, that means 325 times 5 equals $16.25. So there was a total of $16.25 taken in from these adult tickets. And then remember, the children's tickets were $3 a piece. So that's 125 times 3, and that's 375. So what I'll do is I'm going to add one more column over here on the right, and that column is going to be total dollars. And what I need to do is I need to add the dollar amounts here to find out if this total matches up with this 2,000 here. So let's go ahead and do that. 1625 plus the 375, and that indeed does equal 2,000, and that's convenient because now I can circle answer choice C and I can move on. So yeah, that one was pretty simple. Like I said, a question like that with a lot of different phrases, a lot of different pieces of information can be a little bit tricky, which is why you need to make sure that you are attacking it just one little piece at a time. If you try to do too much at once or don't pay attention to exactly what you're being given and how you can use what you're given, you're going to struggle a little bit. Number 49, let's go ahead and read it all the way through. Each contestant at a math competition starts with 30 points. A contestant earns 10 points for each question answered correctly and loses 5 points for each question answered incorrectly. Sammy answered twice as many questions correctly as incorrectly, finishing with 100. So fine. They are asking us correctly. They are asking us for the correct number of questions. So here's what we're going to do. Again, we're going to start with, as we always do, the 2-column T-chart. We are going to do step 2 of making the chart. We're going to label the first column with whatever the question is asking for, and it's asking for the number of correct answers. We are going to go ahead and get the first number that we're starting with in the chart And that will be answer choice C, as it most of the time is. So he answers 20 correctly. So one phrase at a time. First phrase says that he starts with 30 points. So we might want to track that here. We might want to say like start 30 points. And remember, that's going to be, that 30 points is going to be constant for all of these answer choices, because that's what the question says. He starts with 30 points. So it says he earns 10 points for each question answered correctly. Well, we have the number of correct answers. So from that, we can get the points from the correct answer. So this is the points from the correct answer. Loses 5 points for each question answered incorrectly. Well, we don't know what to do with that because we don't know how many points, how many questions he answered incorrectly. We have to actually wait until we get to the next phrase to determine how many incorrect answers he has. This says he answered twice as many correctly as incorrectly. Well, if he has 20 correct, that means our incorrect. So this column will be incorrect. That means he did 10 incorrect. Twice as many correct as incorrect. So if he did 20 correct, that means 10 incorrect. And now we can determine the points lost from the incorrect. Remember, it says that he loses 5 points for each correct question answered incorrectly. That's right here. So he's going to lose 50 points for the incorrect answers. So let's go ahead and tally these up and check the final piece of information, which is that he needs to finish with 150. So he's got 200 points here, 30 points to start. So that's 230 minus the 50. 230 minus the 50 is going to be 180, which is slightly. So he has 180. He finishes with 180, which is not what we need. We needed 150. So what we are going to do is we are going to go down. We want to go down because we got something too big. We got this 180, we needed 150, so let's go down to answer choice B, which is 16. So let's say he answers 16 correctly. Remember, he had 30 to start. That was just given in the first phrase of the question. Points from correct answers would be 160 because remember, the question told us he earns 10 points for each correct answer. Remember, it said that he got twice as many right as wrong. So if he had 16 right, that means he has 8 wrong. Remember, he loses 5 points. Let me get this guy out of here. He loses 5 points for each incorrect question. So he's going to lose 40 points here. 8 times 5 is 40, so he'll lose 40 points. And again, let's tally them up. 30 to start, plus the 160 for the correct, that's 190, minus the 40, 190 minus 40 is indeed 150. And now we have a match with what the question said, and we are done. We circle answer choice B and we move on. So that is Nidus. There is a homework section that follows that you will get a bunch of practice with the technique and making charts, and hopefully you'll become a little bit more of an expert on it. So remember, we started off with the tip-off clue, numbers and the answers. Question has to ask for a single thing. We gave some examples of what single things would look like. We did a couple of introductory examples, talked about the fact that we want to start in the middle at answer choice C or H and then move bigger or smaller depending upon whether we need a bigger or smaller result, and whether we're proceeding to get closer to what the question tells us we need to get to. Then we talked about the fact that if the question asks for the least or greatest possible value, we want to start at the least or greatest answer. So on number 19, they asked for the least possible value of n, so we started with the least possible answer choice. Making charts, remember what I said, just make sure that you follow these 5 steps in this gray box on page 80 when you are starting to learn how to do charts. If you veer from these steps too much, you are probably going to struggle a little bit with the charts, and the charts are extremely helpful, extremely beneficial. So I would become an expert on making charts. That is it for Nidus.